Well, awesome. Welcome, everyone. This is our first inaugural ReadSweetRomance.com author panel. We're excited y'all can make it. So today we're going to have a Q&A. Just kind of ask, y'all can ask some questions. We'll make sure it stays lively. I'll throw some questions in too if we start getting a little bit of a lull, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So why don't we go ahead and introduce everyone. Let's start here on the very end with right here. Let's go. Sorry.
Oh, I'm Taylor Hart, and I'm really excited to be here. And thank you, Austin, and thank you, Jen, for setting this up. And these right here are some of my favorite people. What else do you want us to say?
So how long have you been writing?
Okay. I've been writing for about 15 years and really been publishing for probably the last 10. So it took a while to kind of get the stories going. Okay.
All right, I'm Sarah Gay, and I've been writing for about 7 years now. I started with a historical romance novel and about my mother-in-law and her life growing up in World War II Germany. And from there, Jennifer and I are actually cousins, family, and so I told her about this book. She helped me, and it just went from there. Once I started writing, I said, this is what I want to do, and kept going. And I just absolutely love these girls. They're like family now, and I just love spending time with them.
I'm Jennifer Youngblood, and like Sarah said, we just feel like it's just such a blessing that we all have each other. We'll have to kind of tell them how we all kind of came together later on in the panel, but I hate to even tell you how long I've been writing because then you're going to know how old I am. I've probably been writing about 20 years, and anyway, it's been fun. I absolutely love it, and it's just one of those things that I just can't get enough of. I think probably we all feel that way, and to be able to share this adventure with these wonderful ladies has been a huge blessing, and with you guys too. It's wonderful.
So you've been writing for what? Since you were like 13?
Yes, I was 13. That's what it was.
That's
I
right.
was 12.
Yeah, that's right. Because I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one here. So I'm Cindy Anderson. My writing name, I go by my maiden name because Cindy Anderson, there are thousands of them. And so I went by Cindy Rowland Anderson, and I was glad I did that because when I first published in 2013, it was kind of like the beginning of indie publishing. I mean, it had been going, but it was just I just kind of got my foot in there. And anyway, that's my story on my big, long name. And this is how long I've wanted to write a book. My books didn't have internet. Didn't exist. No cell phone. And in fact, my first book, he had to mail into the college to get like all the information because that's how we did it a long time ago. So that took a long time for it to and that book I started in 2007 and it was published in 2013. So anyway, I had a lot to learn, but I was busy raising 5 kids, so.
Hi, I'm Lucy McConnell. I've been writing for about 15 years, and I started out writing cookbooks and other nonfiction. I would write for the Deseret News, Women's World magazine, things like that. And then one day, my grandmother was 75, and she called me and said that she had written a book, and I was like, "You wrote a book?" And she said, "Yeah, and I'd like you to read it and let me know what you think." And I was inspired. I thought, if she can start writing books, I can start writing books. Like, what am I doing? Because I'd always wanted to write books, but I thought I was stuck doing what I was doing. So she just inspired me to move into writing romance novels and other things that just fed my soul, and I am very grateful for her. So.
Okay, I'm Cami Checketts. I have been writing, I think, 18 years, because my second is almost 18, and I started when he was a baby because I was so depressed. 'Cause he was so cute and fat, but I don't know. So anyway, my mom was trying to help me get over postpartum depression, and she said, "Cami, go and write me a book." And I was like, okay. So anyway, I did, and I fell in love with it, and I'm not depressed anymore because I don't have any time to be. But I love it. I got published in 2009 at first. So.
I'm Christine Kersey, and I started writing about 22 years ago. And I write suspense, but I have also done clean romance, and I also do dystopian and post-apocalyptic, so I'm kind of multi-genre. But I published a book in 2005 with Covenant Communications, and then I started indie publishing 10 years ago, which is crazy to think that it's been that long. And I just love being an independent author, to be able to have all that control.
Same. Okay, I'm Kimberly Cray, and you guys, thank you for being here. This is so fun. I've been writing since 2009, first published in 2012, and what motivated me is falling in love with reading myself. I never thought I was going to be an author growing up or anything. I didn't have any aspirations in that area. And in fact, I did not even enjoy reading as a child. It was just kind of attached to school and a chore. And it was just like, I don't know how people enjoy reading. I fell in love with reading. And what I really wanted was to have some romance that was clean, but still like steamy and yummy kisses and a lot of passion. And I had written other things, but nothing fiction. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a shot. And I did. And I'm so grateful because it's been an amazing journey.
Thank you, all of you. No, that's awesome. So, we know all of y'all came because you all have questions too. I mean, that's part of this. And we have some other stuff too that I think we want to talk about in a little while. But why don't we go ahead and, if y'all are okay with that, open up the floor. So sure, yes.
I was just going to ask, where do you get your inspiration for the subjects of your books?
Oh, that's a great question. Where do y'all?
You want us to use this?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, we're having to play.
You want to start?
Okay, I mean, we might be all the same. Inspiration for me, it's everywhere. Like, there's never a lack of inspiration. It's just me trying to keep up with it and getting some of my future ideas out there and trying to put them on hold and have them quiet up so I can finish this one. But I just feel like it's all around me, and especially when you're living life. If you close yourself away, I think the inspiration sort of shuts off. You know, you're like, oh, I'm going to pull the authors go close themselves away, and it's just not actually very productive for your brain. It doesn't like it, and you lack inspiration when you do that. So really just being out there living life, for me, is constant inspiration.
Well, I can give one specific example. The first book that I published, I got the idea when I was making the bed one day, and as I was tucking the sheets between the mattress and the box spring, I thought, what would happen if a woman was making the bed like this and she found a bunch of money in that mattress and then her husband disappeared? This is, we just have weird imaginations, like crazy things come to us that I don't think normal people think of.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I always have something going. And the other day I was talking to my sister, and she said, I had a horrible run. My music didn't work. And I said, why do you need music when you run? Just talk to the people in your head. And she was like, Cammie, I don't have people in my head. There's something wrong with you. But I think it's probably us. It's a little bit crazy. Yeah.
So my book club, one day I said something about having like 12 dates with the guy that sat in front of me in English class, and he'd never been on one of them officially. I said, doesn't everybody do that? And they all looked at me like, no, we didn't all do that. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's just my brain thinking, and I'd go on all these things. So another big one for me is travel, and I think it's part of the not shutting myself away is getting out and experiencing new places, meeting new people, hearing new accents, all sort of that kind of just inspires me to, and it keeps things fresh for me.
I mean, everything that they've said, and usually it's like one-liners that somebody says, and I'm like, oh, that has to go in a book. And then I'll put it in my notes, and then it turns into this huge story. And if you were to say, like, is this related to this, you would go, no, I don't know where. I was in Twilight when I got the inspiration for Discovering Sophie. So through that whole movie, I'm just sitting there going, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I just had this whole character going, and like just, because when I wrote that book that took me forever to write, I was thinking, I'm going to write one book. That's all I'm going to write. And so then I'm in that movie, Twilight, really? And I write a medical romance, like adventure in the Costa Rican jungle, but that's where all the inspiration came from, so it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I kind of sound like a repeat because I think that is where we get inspiration. I always laugh and say, you better be nice to me or I'll put you in my book. Because writers always get the last word, right? um, yeah. One time, the inspiration for a book came when I was driving. I lived in Tennessee at the time, and we were driving down the backside of the mountain to a place called Dunlap. And it was just beautiful countryside, and I looked around, and I was just overwhelmed with the beauty. And I looked at my husband, we were driving down the road, and I said, honey, is this just not incredible? And he said, well, all I've seen for the past several miles have been a bunch of trailers, pines, and power lines. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's a great title for a book. And at the time I was writing with my mom, and so I called her up and I said, hey, do you think we could write something that involves trailers, pines, and power lines? And she said, sure. Well, then we kept telling people would say, well, good luck with that trailer book. And so we ended up changing the name, but I think it just comes from everywhere. Like Christine says, like I've got one right now, it's about a cleaning lady, and it's because I broke down and got a cleaning lady. And so, yeah, I think it just comes from everywhere. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think my inspiration is I'm a daydreamer. So I just sit and I daydream. And I'd get called out in school all the time for it. I was just, staring off into space and coming up with these different things. And what's funny is these characters really are real in your head. Yeah. I think everyone will attest to that. And sometimes when I'm writing, I'll be writing in bed and my husband's next to me watching a movie or doing something, and I'll just start laughing. And he's like, why are you laughing? I'm like, this is really funny. This scene is really funny. And he's like, oh, okay. So we have fun with our books and our characters. And for us, these people are real. We see this in our head. So it's fun. It's a fun journey.
It's true. So everything they said, but I was thinking, what inspired me to write was that I moved so many times. Hi guys, welcome. I moved so many times and books were my friends, right? And I would sit in the lunchroom by myself for a couple of months and I would read books and they were my friends. And that, back when you're a kid, that's not the funnest thing to go through. But now as an adult, I'm always like, I don't need anyone. I have books, right? And you guys, I see you nodding, but it's like, yeah. And when they're talking about these voices, I can guarantee you guys, even right now, tonight, these guys are thinking, oh man, I wish I had my computer because I could be hammering out something that I'm thinking of right now. What Cindy said, like you're sitting in Twilight and you're going, oh, I got this. And you almost can't, you don't even want to stay at the movie, right? You're like, I gotta go write this down in my notes. I'll be right back. And so my kids are always, that's right. My kids are always like, Mom, just come back, talk to me. And I'm like, just a sec, I have to write down. Just one sec. So anyways.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we'll pass. Kind of a neat little microphone, isn't it?
It's all fuzzy.
So for those that just came in, the floor's open, so we're just a little Q&A. So anyone else has any other questions, so the floor is open for you. Yes?
I was wondering if some of the ladies can speak to how they got interested in writing, maybe what their school assignment experiences were like, and how it transformed from maybe a chore to something they enjoyed or a creative outlet.
For sure.
Insight towards that.
So who'd like to answer that first? I know there's a lot of different, I know all of them pretty well, so I know there's a lot of different backgrounds here.
I have an answer.
Sure.
Well, talking about reading as a child, like in high school, it would kind of drive my mom crazy because during summer vacation, I would rather stay in and read my book. She's like, go hang out with your friends. I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I want to read. That's what I love to do. And I remember I read a book by an author back in 1997, and she wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or anything. And I thought, you know what? She didn't have to know anything special to write this. I can try this. And even as a youth, when I was I think I was like 12, I remember starting to write a book about some two girls that were staying at a beach house with their family, and I got like 2 pages into it and I didn't know where to go from there. So that was my first try. But then as an adult, when I read this author and realized she didn't have to be an expert in any particular field, I thought, I'm going to try this, and I did. So my background, I actually have a degree in information technology, so nothing to do with writing whatsoever, but I've always just loved to read, and I think that just the love of stories. I love to watch movies. I just love stories, and I think that's kind of the key.
I have to say about Christine Kersey, her IT background. Oh, sorry. I feel like we're talking to a stuffed animal or something. I'm like, what? Yeah, we're just pretending. Christine Kersey, I just have to brag on her. She has wicked, tech skills, right? So most of us in our group, if we have a problem, we go to Christine Kersey.
We always say we wish we had her brain.
I know.
She's really smart.
So I just had to brag on Christine.
She really is smart.
Oh, okay. Well, since I have it, let's see. I'm going to pass.
Pass it
I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back.
So I remember when I was in the second grade, actually, no, that couldn't be. No, it had to have been the fifth grade. It had to have been the fifth grade because I moved to a new school and anyway in the fourth, and so it was the fifth grade. And we were given this assignment in our reading class that we had to read. The name of the book was The Forgotten Door, and I wish I could remember. Does anybody ever heard that one? I wish I could remember the author, but it's terrible. I should remember the author, right? But I just remember we could only read the book during class, and class was about 40 minutes. And I started reading that book, and I couldn't put it down, but I had to because we could only read it during class. And I remember looking around and thinking, the kids were like laughing and cutting up, and I thought, what is wrong with them? Why are they not as into this as I am? And I guess that's kind of like Taylor was saying, your books become your best friend. And but I actually studied English, but I've never actually taken a creative writing class. But I've always wanted to write since I was a little girl. I have always wanted to write, and I thought I used to laugh and say that I would be this. Back then I thought an electric typewriter, right? This little old lady in a cabin, picking away on this electric typewriter. And I remember when my boys were little, my husband said, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And it was. Did you go buy a typewriter? I went and bought a typewriter. By then we had graduated. It was kind of we had desktops then, but the internet had not been invented yet, and so. I remember getting up early, I'm not a morning person, so 6 o'clock felt like it was like waking the dead, right? And so I get up, sit in front of my computer screen, and it was scary because I'm looking at this blank screen, and I had to create something, and it kind of freaked me out. And so, because I felt like it had to be perfect the first pass, and luckily I've gotten over that, but that's kind of how mine started, just something I had always wanted to do. And really it was kind of, when I first got published, I felt like I was the odd man out because my books were clean, and I felt like I was just this lone person. The genre had not even been invented yet. I think we all had to find each other. I think you should speak to that, but Lucy had mentioned that about kind of us kind of being some of the front runners of that, which is, I think we all had to find each other. And
Why don't we actually talk about a little bit? Sorry.
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, because I think that's very interesting. I know a lot of people have asked that, through newsletters or just kind of how you found each other. But it's really all of you are really pioneers in the genre.
Since I have the microphone, I'll talk. I'm a spiritual person, and so I don't believe in fate. I believe that there's a God that orchestrates things, and how I got to know all of these ladies was definitely meant to be, because my journey, I'm a nurse, I'm a registered nurse, and NICU baby nurse, and I was terrible in English. And in fact, my first book, when I gave it to my friend and she started reading it, she's like, "Oh my gosh, your grammar is awful." She said, "But the story is so good that I couldn't put it down." And she said, "But I'm going to teach you." And she sat down for 2 hours and taught me how to diagram what a noun was. And I was like, I could resuscitate a baby, but I could not. I did not have. It was really bad. So anyway, my journey was fraught with a lot of obstacles, and at one point I remember saying, it's not meant to be. I'm done. I'm not going to do this. And I had birthday money, and I walked into a bookstore, and my mom said, do not spend it on anything else but yourself. And so, of course, I went to a bookstore to buy some books, and I was buying it, and the guy, I remember his name was Dino, and he looked up at me and he said, you need to write a book. And I started bawling. I'm like, why would you tell me that? And he goes, I don't know, it just came to me, you need to write a book. And so I knew right then, and so there were things like that happened, and especially like how I got to know like Cammie. We just randomly met at some conference, and then she emails me and tells me about these other girls, and we're going to do Snow Valley. And Snow Valley is not a real place. We all wish it was, but it was just really sweet how all of us have come together, and I don't know what I would do without them. They're huge support to me.
Does that answer? Are we good? Like, is that good? Okay.
Did I answer your question?
To tell you.
The responses, ladies, I was asking on behalf of a friend's kid who is a voracious reader but will not write anything, even when it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And I tried to tell him, writer's block, and you just got to do it. It's not getting through. So thank you.
Yeah.
Just give him time.
Yeah, it comes.
Well, and some of us struggle. Like, they introduced a new spelling program in my first grade that they were trying out, and my mom says that I'm the reason they didn't do it because it ruined me for spelling for the rest of my life. And so, there's still things now that I'm like, wait, I know that doesn't look right, but because my brain just got messed up. So I hire an editor, and I hire a proofreader, and I continue forward. And I don't think things like that have to stop you. I don't think you have to look and say, well, I'm limited because I can't do this. It's like, well, just, go do because you have the desire to do. And so, and whatever comes out of it is what's meant to be. And so, we could all, I think, have reasons to not write, but for writer's block, but the fact that it feeds our souls is, I think, the biggest reason that we do. So
I was just going to say that I didn't know any of these people. I was at a conference in 2014, and Taylor just happened to randomly sit next to me, and we struck up a conversation, and we've been buddies since then. But it's through her that I met all these ladies that were just such good friends now. So I feel very, very blessed, and I think it was meant to be. And because she really helps me and I help her, and it's neat how we can all help each other. So and we all live somewhat in the area, so we could try to get together from time to time. But yeah, I think we're very fortunate that we all like clean romance. That's important to us because we can support each other and help each other, and it's been a real blessing.
Who are some of your favorite authors that you enjoyed as a kid, now?
Have you heard of Clive Cussler? Yeah, I love Clive Cussler. I loved as a child Alexandre Dumas. I read, which is weird because I tried to read him the other day. I was like, whoa, this guy is crazy and it's way too long. He spent a whole chapter talking about the servant. I don't care about the servant. So I used to be a lot more patient. Like, I read Les Mis on a bridge 3 times, But yeah, I like the classics a lot growing up.
See, and I didn't read the classics. I like popular fiction. John Grisham, Michael Crichton, Mary Higgins Clark. Those are the things I read growing up.
Mm-hmm. I first fell in love with, I actually really fell in love with Twilight. I will say that. I know people knock on that, but I don't know why, because it's amazing. Yeah, see, they're with me over there. And Marcia McClure, I really, really love her stuff. She was one of the first authors that I read, whom I just appreciated the kind of steamy, clean romance. And so I was really, really going for that. So when I started writing, that's why I was like, okay. And in fact, I had my dad read it. The first book that I wrote, okay. And it was kind of, they say that the first story that you write is autobiographical or biographical kind of. I don't know if that was the same with you guys, but I got out a lot of angst, like when I wrote that, and I had both my parents read it. But anyway, my dad, I remember he said something like, well, it was pretty steamy. And
I was like, yeah, but it was clean. And so I was like, that's going to be my thing. I'm writing romance that's clean without losing the steam, right? I'm going to have it steamy clean. So that's been my motto since then, you know, is kind of how I came up with it. But Marcia Lynn, and then who else? There's one other one besides, of course, always these guys, but whom I discovered first. Oh, I really love Jennifer Peel too. She's fun. Okay.
Yeah, I'm with her on Jennifer Peel. She's awesome. So the first series that I remember getting caught up in was the Sweet Valley High series when I was a teenager, like a teenager, maybe 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. And I remember my mom would be like, what numbers do you not have? Because the numbers were on the spine. And I'd be like, I have a whole, I don't have 4, I don't have 87, I don't have like whatever. And she'd go find those ones and bring them home and I'd read the whole thing. So that was kind of one of mine. That's fun.
I actually read Kimberly Cray, and I was like totally fangirling when I first met her. I was like, "Oh, I just read your book," and that was kind of like one of the first. I read Little House on the Prairie, and then I discovered Victoria Holt. And I would ride. I lived kind of out in the country, and so every Saturday I would ride my bike into town and go to the library and I didn't have a backpack because we didn't have backpacks back then. So my little sack, I would load all my Victoria Holt books, and I would panic if I did not have a book with me. And in fact, before, I love Kindle and everything and on my phone because everywhere I went, I had a book in my purse. And I would start to freak out Saturday nights like, okay, I got to make sure I have enough books to read. And so, yeah, I like having books with me everywhere I go.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I think we all started out loving to read. I used to read all the Nancy Drew series. I would, check them out from the library and love those. And I also, I read a lot of the classics too, I think like Cammie did. I actually read Les Mis too, the unabridged, and loved it. And then I realized that they used to get paid by the word. And I was like, oh, that makes sense why they're, so huge. that makes sense why they spend 3 pages describing, the ceiling or, whatever they're, looking at it. And I like reading a lot of different things. One of my favorite literary works is the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever read that, but it's just, I love the cadence of the words. I really like that, and sometimes I like that. But then I also love Mary Higgins Clark has been one of my favorite. Remember Me was the one that I really like. That's my favorite one of hers, and I also like Gerald Lund too. As for LDS fiction, I loved the Work and the Glory series. I think we've probably all read that one. I thought that one was the greatest thing ever, and. But yeah, I mean, I like John Grisham too. I like a lot of suspense too, and just I like to read all different genres, and I still do. I'll get in these modes where I'll read this one genre for a while, and then I'll switch, and I think it just kind of feeds your brain. Lucy mentioned that one time that she had gone to a workshop, and I think you said the most interesting one was the horror and suspense.
Yeah, I learned more about creating an emotion in a reader from the horror and suspense. It was actually on horror.
Yeah.
From the horror class than I had in any romance class I'd ever taken. So.
And I like to do that. If I feel like that I'm kind of, having a little bit of a brain fog, then I will actually just for a couple of days just read something in a totally different genre, and then it just gives me a clear perspective again. So
I think the first time I remember reading a book and having a physical response to it was in 8th grade, and it was The Pearl. Has anyone read The Pearl by Steinbeck? And just a physical response. And around that time, when I was in junior high, I was in a reading group. They were studying us. I years later realized that they were doing this, but a few friends and they took into a separate room. We had a separate teacher, and I think it was kids that just had a hard time concentrating. Again, remember, I'm a daydreamer. And so I think the teachers knew that. But I remember distinctly one class that the teachers would leave, and this is them studying us. They would leave the classroom, tell us to do something, and I don't know if they were watching from another room or what, but they gave us assignments. And I took a book because they gave me an assignment. I wanted to do it, but I couldn't concentrate. And so I went under a desk in the far corner of the room, and the teacher came back in, and again, they're observing us. And then he talked to us individually, and he brought me up, and he said, "Now, Sarah, why did you do that?" And I said, "Do what?" He said, "Why were you under the desk in the corner?" I'm like, I couldn't read, like I couldn't focus. And he said, "Okay, what do you think you need to do?" And so that's when I started to realize, oh, okay, now I understand this, and I want to learn, and I want to be able to read better. The other book, so that was The Pearl. The other book that I remember having a physical was Les Mis, right? Just incredible. The story just is incredible. And then, okay, this is going to be kind of funny. So then I worked in high school in a library. Wow. Right? And I loved the library, and I loved everything about it. And I didn't realize that some genres just anyone could check out. And I got a Danielle Steele book, and I didn't understand some of the stuff that would be in there. And I found out real quick and I learned some stuff that I didn't know before. But anyways, I love the library system and the library and what you learn there.
I love that. I know I'm almost like so into Sarah's story. I'm like, what was the question again? It was.
How did you?
Okay.
Authors like
Okay.
Kind of diverse.
Anita Stansfield, right? When I was growing up, like 12 to 18, and I grew up moving around and outside of Utah, and so getting Anita Stansfield books were like precious. And I would come visit my grandma. She's still alive. And she would have these Anita Stansfield books that she would read, and she would loan them to me. So I would take a stack home, and I would read them. She would also loan me Louis L'Amour books, right? And just a whole bunch of books. My grandma really fostered my love of reading. And so I would just boom, boom, push out those books. And then I did Kim Cray. I love Twilight. I remember after I had my third baby, I had moved. And like starting Twilight and like reading I didn't know anyone, and it was winter. And I was like, I read those like 3 times. My husband's like, "Are you okay?" I don't know if you should put the books down and just go to the stores. But I love contemporary fiction. I do love suspense, but I probably love, the contemporary romance the most. I love characters that are so broken, right? And I think Anita Stansfield was a master at that with her romance, putting them back together.
So other questions? Yes, you're in the back.
So, how old were you, and how old were your children when you first published your first book, and how long did it take for you to write it?
Also, let's
Go
start
down
here. You'll
down
start
the
on
line.
mine, yeah.
Okay. So it was about 10 years ago, which means instead of having 22 to 14, I had 12 to 4. 4 kids, 2 girls and then 2 boys, right? And it took me 3 years. It took me 3 years to not only write the book, but that whole entire time I was researching agents and agencies and querying and just all of that in the writing world. And then finally, it took me probably maybe a year and a half. I don't know how long it took me to realize that I needed to involve myself in the community. But it was when I got, I thought I was doing it all right. I was been writing and I'd been really working in my craft, and I had a ton of people go over, and I was finally getting interest from agents and stuff like that. And then one agent who had requested a full, which was a really big deal, got back to me and she said that, my work had lacked polish. And she loved the story, but I'm still just lacking polish. And I was like, that is impossible. There's no way. And I had put so much of my life, my heart, my energy, my time, my everything. And I already kind of had some guilt. And I tried to do the same thing. Like when the kids, my boys get home from school, I'm done now. You know what I mean? Like my husband's going to be coming home from work, and I pretty much try to end it unless I can sneak in a newsletter, in front of the TV with them, whatever, But anyway, but at that point, I was just kind of like, it was sort of like a sit down with God moment. And I was like, Lord, I remember I was like in my kids' closet. I was going through their winter, summer, I don't know, whatever the seasons. There was a season change. And I was like, if you don't want me to do this, like, I won't. You know, if I'm just like being greedy with my time, like, because I fell in love with writing. Oh, it was like, I did not know what it was going to do to my soul, you know, but I really came alive with it. But I was just like, you know, if this isn't right, then I won't do it. You know, I really, really won't. But that was a painful thing for me to say. But it was a moment of surrender, as I kind of talked about it with Taylor. But anyway, and then right after that, I got a phone call from my mother Anyway, somehow I'm telling her about it, you know, and she says, sweetie, I don't think you should give up. You know, I think there are other writers, you know, I'm sure there are. And I was like, in Utah? Yeah, right. Like, I'd been researching online and the agents and all over the place. I had no idea the kind of community, and it has evolved, you know, a lot recently. But anyway, she got online and she says, sweetie, there's a group and they meet in Ogden in this library once a month. Let me see, da-da-da. She goes, Kimberly, it is tonight. She's like, it is tonight. I will go with you. And I was like, okay. And I went there and the energy was amazing. I've never been around other authors, other writers, you know, and I could not believe the energy. Like, it was just the most, I don't know, it was like coming home in a way, you know? And so that was beautiful. But I did have to, while my kids were young, I had to sneak time in. I was always inspired, super late at night. Mama was tired, but I would just grab my laptop and go, and I would pound out scene after scene in the middle of the night. I would get up early. I would just sneak, you know, my time in, and having, hey, my boy watching Barney, you know, whatever that was when I could do that. So, yeah.
Well, when I started writing, it was 1997, so I was 32. And my children, my youngest was 3, and I have four children. My oldest was 11. And that's when we got our first computer. And I had taken typing, so I knew how to type. And so being able to type it up, the story just poured out of me. It took me 4 weeks to write it, and it's Suspicions, which is, I have a copy I'm giving away tonight. And anyway, so I wrote that in 4 weeks. And then later that year, I went to, I lived in California. There was a thing called BoucherCon, which is like mystery authors would be there and fans would be there. So I went there and met with other authors and talked to a couple agents, and I sent a query to those agents and they turned it down. And then I wrote another book, No Way Out, which I'm also giving some copies away tonight. And that one, we moved to Utah in 1999, and my sister happened to be in the ward with somebody who was an editor at Covenant, and she hooked me up with her. And she read my book over the weekend and she really liked it, but it wasn't until 2005 that they published No Way Out. And then they didn't want to publish, and in the meantime I went back to school, got my degree, so I hadn't done a lot of writing. Well, I hadn't done a lot of writing during that time. But then, so they published that book in 2005, and so that took quite a while to get that first book published. But then they didn't want to publish the next 2 books that I had given them, and so that really kind of dampened my passion. And I was working full time by then. I had 4 children. It's like, why do I want to spend a lot of time on this, you know, if it's not going anywhere? But then in 10 years ago, in 2009, J.A. Conrath, I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a well-known author. He writes thrillers and things like that. And he had a blog where he talked about independent publishing, and he shared how much money he was making and just talked about what he could do uploading those books to Amazon. And it relit my passion. I'm like, I don't have to go through a committee. I can just upload what I want, and readers can decide. And so I had 3 books that I uploaded, and then ever since then I've been publishing through Amazon, and I was publishing through the other, like Barnes & Noble and things, but now it's just Amazon primarily. So with independent publishing, when you feel like your book's ready and you have maybe some critique groups or an editor and some different people you can run it by, once you feel it's ready, you can publish your books if you feel like that's something you want to do. So there's not like you have to go through a committee who has to approve your work. So it's a lot more freedom, and it's a lot better for authors.
So the question was, when did we... You're awesome. I'm like, I got to think about years. Oh, okay. Okay, so I started writing, like I said, when my 18-year-old was, 2002. In 2007 was when I first got published. So I had 3 little boys, and my youngest was almost a year. And I cut my fingers off the exact same time. So that was really fun. And so it was kind of crazy, but I got 2 books out that year. And then the next year, and that was through a publisher out of New York who somebody, have you heard of URWA? It's like the Utah Romance Writers. So finding fun groups. So a friend there was an editor there and got me in. And then I published with the LDS publisher. And then finally in 2012, I realized that indie was the way to go. Because the LDS publisher was great, but they're like, oh yeah, we want you to put out a book a year. And I'm like, no. You don't know the crap that's in my head. It needs to come out. There's no way I'm waiting, you know. So, and I realized like readers want more. So that's mostly what I'm in.
I would have to do a lot of math to figure out how old I was, so I'm just not going to. I'm trying to think how old I was when I wrote my first book, or how many kids I had. With my first cookbook, it was when I had 3 little boys. And then I wrote my first fiction novel when I had 4 kids. And I remember nursing my daughter with this arm while I was pecking out on this arm. So, yeah, one-handed. My laptop was on the couch next to me. And it took me, I'm going to say 6 months to write that first one. And then when things really took off, it was like the 3rd book in my Billionaire Marriage Broker series. And I remember we were actually at Disneyland, and my daughter was so small, like she couldn't ride things. I think she was still in the stroller. And that was when I started putting out a book every 3 months, is when I picked up to that stage. And so I had 4 little kids. I was actually waitressing at night. And so nap times I would make the most of. And then I developed I outline in like notebooks. I outline by hand, so I could take it anywhere with me. So if we were sitting at the doctor's office, I could outline, and I didn't have to worry about my computer or if it was going to get smacked by some kid or some Cheez-Its thrown on it or something, whatever they had. So and I still do that to this day. I have a notebook with me wherever I go, so I can outline wherever I am, so that I can maximize every moment of every day, so that I can be writing all the time. So.
I was really old. So I have 5 kids. My oldest is 32 and my youngest is almost 18. And so my youngest, I was 37 when I had him. And by the time he got into kindergarten is when I really was like, okay, I'm going to really try to do this. And so I think I was 41 when I first published my first book, and I'm now 53. So it's never too late to start.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out my age too, and I'm like, goodness, this is why we're authors, right? Because we're like math. But I do remember that my first one got published in 2004 was when it got published, and like these guys, like I said, I'd always wanted to be a writer, and when I started my first one, I actually did a historical, and it was inspired by the life of my great grandmother, and I talked my mom into writing with me. And so it took us 3 years to write and research. And like I said, that was, I don't remember, I just didn't, when was the internet invented? I'm trying to remember that in my head, because I remember like borrowing books from the library system. We lived in Texas at the time. And I remember like borrowing, like I needed one on Alabama, and here I am in Texas. And so it took like a week or two, to get it. And, and I would kind of do the notebook thing like Christina did. And then I started hauling my computer around, different places. And, but I was able to finally get published, and I remember so excited. I remember I got this. We'd moved back to Tennessee, and I got this email, which is, that said, we may be interested in your manuscript, and I'm like, well, are you or are you not interested? You may be interested in my manuscript, and so anyway, long story short, I talked to the publisher, and they were interested, and they did our first 2 books, and it was great. I loved the experience. It was wonderful. But I was really grateful, like Christine said, when the indie publishing came along, because it kind of, before everything has to go through a committee, and it takes so long. It takes 18 months to put out a book, and then you just feel like all these people have a hand in it, and so this is wonderful, because now you can put out things as so much faster, and it can get directly to the readers, and you skip all these middlemen, and it's just been wonderful. I'm very grateful for indie publishing, and just have to say that, so I came up with, I ended up in this group because of Taylor, who is one of my sister's best friends, and they're besties, and anyway, Taylor and I were always going back and forth, and we were working out at the gym one day, and I realized the success that she was having, and And she told me, how her books were doing. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you serious? That is awesome. So I went home that day and said, okay, all right, time to get serious about this again. So I'm very grateful to her, and just to have all these wonderful ladies like in my life. It's been grateful. And she's still really good. Like, I've had a lot of hearts to hearts with her, and she's like, okay, you got to do this. You can do this. So thank you.
So my first book took quite a while as well. It was historical fiction, so based on my mother-in-law, and I wanted to get it right. So I interviewed her siblings. We actually went back to Germany, toured. And so at that time, when I started interviewing her, I had 2 children, and they were both 3 and under. And then by the time I finished the book, my son was going into kindergarten. So it took quite a while, the process. But I wanted to have that be accurate and have that historical fiction be so, as accurate as I could, because it had to deal with World War II and my mother-in-law actually meeting Hitler. And I mean, there were these things in there where I just wanted to make sure they were accurate. But what's interesting, and I was talking to Jennifer before I started, and we were kind of going through the plot, and she said, you know what, Sarah? She said, so many people want to write, but it's just starting. Yeah. It's just doing it. And then once I actually did it, she said, wow, I'm impressed.
Oh,
she said, you don't know how many people I talk to and they say, oh, I'm going to write a book. And she said, you did it, and you did it. Yeah. So I think it's hard. It's hard to start, but once you start, it's easy. And then once I did start, you just can't stop. Yeah. I mean, if you really love it, and I was, so Tom's aunt, who she approved of the book, she said, you've got a gift. And I said, well, no, I just wrote your story. And she said, no, you need to keep writing. You don't get it. You need to keep writing. And I said, okay, I love it. I'll keep writing.
Sarah is have you guys read a lot? Sarah is a beautiful writer. Beautiful.
Thank you.
The way that she,
Thank you.
Beautiful person. Okay, so I started writing when I was young, but nothing really happened with that. And then I went to college. I have a bachelor's in English, and that kind of like defeated my soul, right? Getting a bachelor's in English and having everyone mark it up, and it was and then I heard the phrase, Shakespeare couldn't spell. Okay, and so was it your husband that asked the question about, it doesn't matter if you can spell, it doesn't matter, just write, like Cindy said, just write. But it took a long time. I started writing, and then I met actually Lucy McConnell and Cammie and Cindy at a indie conference, and we had lunch together, and that's when we started doing Snow Valley. And then I met Christine Kersey, and she, like I said, she has wicked tech skills. Like, she really helped me just get an uptake of like how to do things on my own. And that's probably what takes the most time now when we're saying, like, yeah, you can get stuff to market faster with Amazon, but you still have to learn, not just how to write a book, but formatting a book, and, just the process of, you can learn it. But that's probably what takes, it's not just writing a book anymore, it's all those tech skills you kind of have to learn, but you can. So are you writing? I was going to ask you. Yeah. That's cool. Oh. Okay. Yeah.
What genre are you doing? Fantastic.
You guys all inspired me. I've read almost all.
Yay. See, but that's cool. You've written the book. That's awesome. So.
You actually inspired me a lot. I took your little course that you were guinea pigging.
Yeah.
And you really kickstarted me.
That's awesome. And this is what I love is like, all of us, the next step, we're just the next, we help each other and we pull each other up. And I'm really grateful for these ladies because that's how we do it. Right, guys? Yeah. But anyway, it's doable. And 6 kids, that's a lot. But man, you've written, like, who was saying that? Oh, Lucy I did the same thing. Yeah. You just, I think if you just keep going. So.
I'm not sure if it's good
But you did it. But you did it.
Thank you. So any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Maybe this question is for Jennifer, but there's a rumor floating out there that you've all chosen the right romance just to make an unfulfilled expectation.
We said that there was no heckling allowed of the authors. This is my husband. This story refers to, I don't know if I told you guys this. If I do, you'll be like, probably react the same way I did. So he had lunch with this, a friend of his that he had, I guess you hadn't seen him in what, like 20 something years. And he came home and he told his friend that I wrote Clean Romance. And his friend said, well, you know what she's doing, right? She's just like living out unfulfilled expectations. And I was furious. And I was like, and he started telling me more about his friend, and I said, "Oh, well, it's no secret that he's divorced, by himself." But anyway, just to clarify, we are not living out unfulfilled expectations.
That's funny. That's one that I get asked a lot too, which cracks me up. Is do you write your husband in your romances? And I'm like, no, that's what an imagination is for.
Well, I just want to give a shout out to my sister and my daughter who just got here, because my sister, when I first started writing, she was my editor for like the first couple years, and she made such a difference helping me get my books as good as they could be. And so I really appreciate her. And my daughter Laura, she's like one of my biggest fans. She's read every single one of my books. She's like one of the first people I give my books to. So I'm so grateful for the support I get from my family.
I think writing is always one of those things where it's a big friend and family affair. It's a lot of people go into supporting it. And it's cool that we have a few of those people here in this room too. For like.